Right now, somewhere in the world, someone just woke up with that familiar feeling. You know the one, that quiet sense that despite everything they've accomplished, everything they've worked toward, something essential is still missing. It's that subtle emptiness that creeps back in after achieving a long-sought goal, the unsettling feeling that there must be something more, something deeper than the next achievement, the next pleasure, the next milestone. You've felt this too, haven't you? That whisper in the quiet moments asking, is this really all there is? What I'm about to share has transformed the lives of millions across every culture and background. If you'd like, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. It's beautiful to know we're connected in this universal search for meaning. Find a comfortable spot if you can. Maybe grab a blanket or settle somewhere peaceful. This isn't just information we're exploring together. It's an invitation to discover what your heart has been seeking all along. Here's what changes everything. 2,500 years ago, a young prince who seemed to have the perfect life discovered why 99% of us are searching in all the wrong places. His name was Siddhartha, and he became the Buddha. And his discovery is about to change how you see the very purpose of being alive. There's a moment that reveals everything about the human condition. Jim Carrey, surrounded by everything most people dream of, looked into a camera and shared something that changed how millions see success. "I wish everyone could get rich and famous," he said, his voice carrying a weight that fame couldn't lift, "and have everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not the answer." Can you feel the tenderness in those words? Here's someone who climbed the mountain that millions are scaling right now. The mountain of achievement, recognition, having it all, only to discover the view from the top wasn't what his heart was seeking. And Jim's not alone in this discovery. Isaac Newton, the genius who revealed how the universe works, spent his final days comparing himself to a boy playing on the seashore while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before him. Despite changing everything we know about reality itself, something vast and essential still felt missing. There's something so achingly human about this, isn't there? Even Leonardo da Vinci, whose hands gave us the Mona Lisa, whose mind conceived flying machines centuries before they existed, whispered on his deathbed that his life's work didn't reach the quality it should have. Perfection itself couldn't quiet that inner voice. Michael Jackson, the king of pop who broke every record imaginable, once admitted quietly in an interview, "I'm never pleased with anything." Here was someone who had sold tens of millions of albums, whose music moved the world. Yet he described himself as perpetually dissatisfied, always feeling his next project needed to be better. Even when bad was topping charts worldwide, an inner restlessness gnawed at him. Now, take a gentle breath. Because if you're listening to this, you probably recognize something familiar in these stories. Not because you're ungrateful or broken, but because you're beautifully, completely human. Maybe you remember the last time you achieved something you'd been working toward for months. That promotion, that purchase, that experience you'd built up in your mind. There was genuine joy, wasn't there? A real moment of, yes, this is it. But how long did that feeling stay before the familiar restlessness returned? For most of us, it's heartbreakingly brief. Days, maybe weeks, and then we find ourselves looking toward the next goal, the next achievement, the next thing that will surely be different this time. It's like being on the gentlest treadmill, moving, working so hard, but somehow remaining in the same emotional place. But here's what needs to be understood. With all the tenderness in the world, this isn't a flaw in anyone's character. This isn't evidence of not being grateful enough or trying hard enough. This is the most natural thing in the world, and it touches every human heart. Those people posting perfect moments on social media, they wake up at 3 a.m. with the same questions you do. The colleagues who seem to have it all figured out carry the same tender longing for something they can't quite name. We're all looking for the same thing, aren't we? That sense of being truly at peace, truly home in our own lives. But here's where this gets really interesting. And this might sound strange at first, but stay present for this. What if getting what we want was never supposed to give us what we're actually seeking? What if we've been asking our achievements to do something they were never designed to do? It's like asking a beautiful painting to cook dinner. The painting is wonderful, but it's not a chef. Our successes are genuinely beautiful, but they might not be the source of lasting peace we've been hoping they would be. This pattern appears in every culture, every era, every level of society. The wealthy executive and the struggling artist, the famous celebrity and the quiet neighbor, all carrying the same quiet question in their hearts. All discovering that external circumstances, no matter how perfect they seem, can't quite fill that space inside that longs for something deeper. So, what are we actually seeking? What is that quiet voice really asking for when it whispers, "Is this all there is?" And why does this pattern seem to be woven into the very fabric of human experience? There's something so loving about the way we're raised, isn't it? From the earliest days, the world wraps us in a story filled with hope and promise. Work hard in school, follow your dreams, build the life you imagine, and happiness will naturally follow. It's such a tender story, told by parents who want the best for us, teachers who believe in our potential. Every culture seems to whisper this same gentle promise. Success will bring satisfaction. Accomplishment will bring joy. The right combination of experiences and achievements will unlock that golden door to lasting fulfillment. Even our founding documents speak of the pursuit of happiness as a fundamental right. How beautiful is that? A civilization built on the idea that happiness is not just possible, but something we should actively chase. And there's genuine wisdom in this story. Goals give us direction. Achievements bring real moments of satisfaction. Building something meaningful does touch the heart. But here's where something so well-intentioned creates the most loving trap imaginable. We begin to treat happiness not as a natural byproduct of living fully, but as the primary destination itself. Every decision gets filtered through the question, will this make me happy? Every choice becomes part of a grand strategy to maximize joy and minimize discomfort. It sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? So logical and caring toward ourselves. But something curious happens when we make happiness our main objective. It becomes like trying to fall asleep by commanding ourselves to sleep. The harder we try, the more elusive it becomes. You've probably experienced this when planning something special. The more pressure you put on an event to be perfect, the more anxiety creeps in around whether it will live up to your expectations. This creates what we might call the happiness paradox. The very act of chasing happiness as our primary goal can actually make us less happy. When we're constantly measuring our emotional temperature, asking, "Am I happy yet? How about now?" we create a subtle but persistent sense that something is wrong with our current experience. Think about the last time you felt truly content. Chances are, you weren't thinking about happiness at all. Maybe you were absorbed in a conversation with someone you love, or lost in an activity that felt meaningful, or simply present with a beautiful sunset. Happiness snuck up on you when you weren't looking for it. Our well-meaning culture amplifies this trap in countless ways. Advertisements promise that the right purchase will bring satisfaction. Self-help books offer formulas for happiness. Even our casual conversations often center around what's making us happy or unhappy. We've created an entire economy built around the idea that happiness is something we can acquire, achieve, or optimize our way into. But here's what's so tender about this whole situation. Nobody set out to create a trap. Every parent wanting their child to be happy, every teacher encouraging students to follow their bliss, every friend offering advice about finding joy. All of this comes from genuine love. We've all been doing our absolute best with the most beautiful of intentions. The trap becomes visible when we notice that the happiest people we know often aren't the ones chasing happiness most intensely. They're usually the ones absorbed in something larger than themselves, caring for others, creating something meaningful, working toward a purpose that transcends their personal pleasure. Their happiness seems to flow naturally from engagement with life, not from the pursuit of happiness itself. What if we've been asking life to give us something it was never designed to provide? What if happiness, like a rainbow, is something that appears when conditions are right, but disappears the moment we try to grasp it? What if we've been so focused on the destination that we've forgotten how to simply walk the path? This doesn't mean happiness is bad or that joy doesn't matter. It means something far more liberating. It means we might be climbing a beautiful ladder with tremendous effort and sincerity, but perhaps it's leaning against a wall that can only take us so far. Long ago, a young prince found himself in this exact same beautiful trap. He had everything the wall of success could offer. And his discovery of the other wall, gentle, revolutionary, and available to each of us, changes everything, but in the softest way. There's something so beautiful about the human spirit, isn't there? For thousands of years, in every culture, we've been asking the same heartfelt question: How can I be happy? It's such a natural, loving question to ask. Of course we want to feel good. Of course we want joy. Of course we want our lives to feel meaningful and bright. But what if, and this is such a gentle possibility to consider, what if this question, as sincere as it is, has been leading us down a path that can never quite take us where we want to go? Imagine someone trying to fill a bucket with water. They pour and pour, working so diligently, getting frustrated that the bucket never seems to stay full. They try different types of water, faster pouring, bigger containers, but somehow the satisfaction never lasts. The bucket always seems to empty again. Now imagine someone else walking by and gently pointing out, "There's a hole in the bottom of your bucket." Suddenly, everything becomes clear. The problem was never the water, or the pouring technique, or the effort being made. The problem was trying to fill something that was designed to leak. This is what happens when we ask, "How can I be happier?" We're essentially trying to pour more and more experiences, achievements, and pleasures into our lives, hoping they'll create lasting fulfillment. And they do work. Temporarily. Just like water briefly fills the bucket before draining out again. But here's what's so tender about this realization. The hole in our bucket isn't some terrible flaw or personal failing. It's actually something much more beautiful and profound. It's the way consciousness itself seems to work. Constantly moving, constantly changing, never able to hold on to any experience permanently. Every moment of joy naturally gives way to the next moment. Every achievement, no matter how wonderful, becomes part of our history rather than our present. Every pleasure, every success, every beautiful experience flows through our awareness, like water through that gentle hole. This isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. So what if we asked a different question entirely? Instead of, "How can I be happier?" what if we asked, "How can I be at peace with the natural flow of life?" Instead of, "How can I get more of what I want?" what if we asked, "How can I understand what's driving this constant wanting?" This isn't about giving up on joy or becoming passive about life. It's about something far more radical and freeing. It's about discovering that the peace we've been seeking through external changes might be available right here, right now, simply by changing our relationship to the experiences we're already having. Think about those moments when you felt most at peace. Often, they weren't moments of intense pleasure or major achievement. They were moments of simple presence. Watching a sunset, holding someone you love, feeling completely okay with exactly what was happening. In those moments, you weren't asking the bucket to hold water permanently. You were simply appreciating the water while it was there. This shift in questioning changes everything. Instead of constantly trying to rearrange our external circumstances to make us happy, we begin to investigate the internal conditions that create restlessness. Instead of adding more water to the bucket, we become curious about the hole itself. And here's where this becomes deeply practical. When we stop asking, "How can I be happier?" and start asking, "What is this dissatisfaction trying to teach me?" we suddenly have access to answers that actually work. not temporary fixes that need constant maintenance, but genuine shifts in understanding that change how we relate to everything. The question becomes, what is it in me that feels incomplete? Or, what if this longing is pointing towards something deeper than any external experience could provide? Or even more simply, what if I don't need to be different than I am right now to be okay? These aren't philosophical puzzles to solve with the mind. They're invitations to a different way of living, a different way of being present with whatever arises. They point toward a kind of fulfillment that doesn't depend on getting specific outcomes or maintaining particular emotional states. When we shift from asking, "How can I be happier?" to "How can I understand the nature of my own restlessness?" everything changes. Not because we find a different answer, but because we discover we've been living inside a completely different question all along. And that shift in questioning, from trying to fill the bucket to understanding the whole, opens a doorway to a peace that doesn't depend on anything being different than it is. You might be wondering why we're turning to a story from 2,500 years ago when we're dealing with such modern challenges. Why look backward when we have so much contemporary wisdom, so much research, so many new approaches to well-being? It's such a fair question, and there's something beautiful about asking it. Here's what's remarkable about the human heart. The deepest questions we face haven't changed much across millennia. The same restlessness that touches you at 3 a.m. touched people in ancient Greece, in medieval Europe, in Renaissance Italy. The same quiet voice asking, "Is this all there is?" has whispered to human beings across every culture and every era. We have incredible technology now, unprecedented comfort, access to information that previous generations couldn't even imagine. Yet somehow, the fundamental human experience of longing for something deeper remains exactly the same. The tools for happiness have evolved dramatically, but the nature of happiness itself, and our relationship to it, follows patterns that are timelessly human. What makes ancient wisdom so precious isn't that it's old, but that it's been tested. When insights survive across thousands of years, across countless cultures, across the rise and fall of civilizations, there's something in them that speaks to something unchanging in the human experience. They've been refined not in laboratories, but in the laboratory of human hearts. And here's something so tender to recognize. If you're listening to this right now, wherever you are in the world, whether you're walking through a busy city, sitting in a quiet room, or lying down in the peaceful darkness, you're part of an ancient lineage of seekers. People who've looked at the surface of life and sensed there must be something more. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're not ungrateful or damaged or missing some essential piece that everyone else seems to have. You're simply awake enough to notice that the conventional answers, as well-meaning as they are, don't quite satisfy the deepest part of you. And that awakeness, that willingness to keep questioning, is actually a form of wisdom itself. What we're about to explore together isn't just historical curiosity or philosophical speculation. It's a living discovery that continues to transform lives today. The insight we're approaching has been verified not through research studies, but through the direct experience of millions of people who found genuine peace by walking this path. And here's what's so beautiful about what's coming. The story we're about to enter isn't about someone special or superhuman who achieved something impossible. It's about someone who faced exactly the same fundamental questions you're facing, just with the advantages of a different time and place to investigate them deeply. The revolutionary insight that emerged from his investigation wasn't mystical or otherworldly. It was simply a clear seeing of how suffering actually works, and therefore, how it can be brought to an end. It was practical wisdom disguised as spiritual awakening. Or maybe it was spiritual awakening revealed to be intensely practical. What makes this ancient discovery so relevant today is that it addresses the very mechanism we've been exploring together. The bucket with the hole, the beautiful trap of chasing happiness, the question we've been asking wrong. All of this finds its resolution in what this young seeker discovered under a tree in ancient India. But the resolution isn't what you might expect. It's not a technique to get better at filling the bucket or a strategy to make the hole smaller. It's something far more radical and, once you see it, far more obvious. It's a complete reframe of what the bucket and the hole and the water actually represent. As we step into this story together, notice how it feels to give yourself permission to be genuinely curious about life's deeper questions. Notice the relief of not having to figure everything out on your own, of knowing that others have walked this path of inquiry before you and left gentle guideposts along the way. What you're about to discover has the power to change not just how you think about happiness, but how you relate to every experience in your life. It offers a way of being that's both deeply peaceful and fully engaged with the world, a way of living that doesn't require anything external to change for you to feel fundamentally okay. Let me tell you about the most privileged person who ever lived. Imagine, if you can, a life where every single desire is fulfilled the moment it arises. Not someday, not after working toward it, not if you're lucky, but immediately, effortlessly, perfectly. This was the world that young Prince Siddhartha was born into in ancient Nepal. His father, King Suddhodana, had created what might be the most elaborate paradise ever constructed for a single human being. 3 palaces, one for each season, each more beautiful than the last. Gardens that bloomed eternally, with flowers from every corner of the known world. Musicians who played day and night, ensuring that every moment was accompanied by perfect harmony. The most exquisite foods were prepared by master chefs, not just from his own kingdom, but delicacies brought from distant lands by traders who crossed deserts and mountains just to serve the prince's table. Silks, softer than anything you could imagine, draped every surface. Jewels that caught and scattered light, like captured rainbows, adorned every room. But it wasn't just material luxury. Siddhartha was surrounded by the most beautiful, intelligent, accomplished people of his time. Poets who could weave words into magic, dancers whose movements seemed to defy gravity, philosophers who could discuss the deepest questions with brilliant insight. Every conversation was stimulating, every encounter was delightful, every relationship was harmonious. His father had made sure that nothing unpleasant ever entered his son's world. No sickness, no poverty, no conflict, no reminders of life's harder edges. If a flower began to wilt in the garden, it was quietly replaced before the prince could see it. If a servant showed signs of aging, they were gently reassigned to duties outside the palace walls. It was a world of perpetual spring, perpetual youth, perpetual beauty. And here's what's so fascinating about this ultimate fantasy life. Siddhartha had everything that every advertisement promises us, everything that every self-help book suggests will make us happy, everything that social media holds up as the ideal existence. He had unlimited wealth, perfect health, constant entertainment, meaningful relationships, creative fulfillment, and absolute security. Yet something was stirring in his heart. Can you feel the strange sadness in that? Here was someone living the ultimate dream, surrounded by everything anyone could want. And still, in the quiet moments between pleasures, there was a restlessness. A sense that all this beauty, all this perfection, was somehow not quite reaching the deepest part of him. It wasn't that the pleasures weren't real. The music was genuinely beautiful. The food was truly delicious. The relationships were authentically loving. But there was something about the very perfection of it all that felt somehow incomplete. Like living inside a gorgeous painting rather than experiencing real life. Siddhartha began to notice things that no one else seemed to see. How the most exquisite pleasure, no matter how intense, would naturally fade into a need for the next pleasure. How even the most engaging conversation would eventually end, leaving a subtle emptiness. How the constant fulfillment of desires somehow wasn't fulfilling the part of him that was creating the desires in the first place. He started to feel like he was living inside the most beautiful cage ever constructed. Every bar was made of gold, every lock was encrusted with diamonds, every corner was filled with delights. But it was still, somehow, a cage. The very perfection that was meant to make him happy was beginning to feel like a barrier to understanding what happiness actually was. There's something so poignant about this, isn't there? Here was someone who had won the ultimate lottery of life, and he was beginning to suspect that the lottery itself might be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what human beings actually need. Late at night, when the music had stopped and the courtiers had retired, and the palace settled into its perfumed silence, Siddhartha would lie awake with questions that all the luxury in the world couldn't answer. Is this really what life is about? Is pleasure the highest thing a human being can experience? Why does fulfilling every desire just create more desires? His father noticed the change in his son and tried to address it the only way he knew how, by adding more pleasure, more distractions, more entertainment. He arranged for even more beautiful companions, even more exquisite meals, even more elaborate festivities. But it was like trying to cure thirst by offering someone salt water. The more Siddhartha drank from the fountain of pleasure, the thirstier he became for something he couldn't even name. And then, as he approached his late 20s, something in him began to insist on answers to questions that couldn't be satisfied by anything the palace contained. A curiosity about what lay beyond the golden walls, beyond the carefully curated perfection of his protected world. What was real life actually like? What were people experiencing outside this bubble of constant gratification? Was there something essential about the human experience that all this luxury was actually preventing him from understanding? But 4 things changed everything. 4 encounters that would shatter the beautiful illusion of the palace forever and set in motion a discovery that would transform not just one man's understanding, but offer a path of freedom that continues to change lives 2,500 years later. One morning, something restless stirred in Siddhartha's heart, with such intensity that he could no longer ignore it. For 29 years, he had lived within the palace walls, seeing only what his father wanted him to see. But that morning, the questions that had been quietly growing inside him became an irresistible call to venture beyond the golden gates. He asked his charioteer, Channa, to prepare for a journey into the city. His father had forbidden such trips, but something deeper than filial duty was driving the prince now. He needed to see the world as it actually was, not as it had been carefully presented to him. The first sight that stopped him completely was an elderly man. Not someone gracefully aging in comfort, but someone whose body carried the full weight of years. Bent over, moving slowly, skin weathered by decades of living. Siddhartha had never seen anything like this in his palace of eternal youth. "What has happened to this person?" he asked Channa, genuinely confused. The charioteer, realizing that the prince's sheltered life had hidden even this basic truth, gently explained, "This is old age, my lord. This is what happens to all human bodies as time passes. Everyone ages. The servants, the nobles, you, me. This is how all our stories end if we live long enough." Something cracked open in Siddhartha's chest. All the beautiful young people in his palace, all the vibrant conversations and graceful dances, all of it would one day bend and slow and fade. How had no one ever told him this? How had this fundamental truth of existence been kept from him? They continued through the city, but Siddhartha's mind was reeling. If aging was universal, what else didn't he know about the nature of life? And then, as if the universe was determined to complete his education, they encountered the second sight. A person lying by the roadside, body racked with illness. Fever, pain, the kind of suffering that transforms a human being into something barely recognizable. Again, Siddhartha had never witnessed anything like this in his carefully sanitized world. "What is this?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer would shatter another piece of his protected worldview. "This is sickness, my lord," Channa replied with growing sadness. "Disease can strike anyone, at any time. The body, no matter how healthy or beautiful, can become a source of tremendous suffering. This too is part of the human condition." Now Siddhartha understood why the palace had felt like a cage. Not because it was confining his freedom, but because it was confining his understanding. How could he make sense of his own life if he didn't know the basic conditions that all life operated under? How could he find genuine meaning in pleasures that were built on the denial of such fundamental realities? But the universe wasn't finished with his education. The third sight appeared as they rounded a corner, a funeral procession carrying someone who had died. The grief of the family, the finality of the covered form, the unmistakable presence of death itself. Siddhartha had never seen death before. In his palace, when people died, they simply disappeared, quietly reassigned, his father would say. But this was death revealed in all its stark reality. The absolute end of everything he understood about existence. "This happens to everyone?" he whispered. "Everyone. Everyone, my lord. Old age, sickness, death. These are what the Buddha would later call the first three forms of suffering that touch every human life. No amount of wealth or beauty or pleasure can ultimately protect us from these realities." Siddhartha felt as if the foundation of his entire worldview was crumbling. Everything in the palace, the eternal spring, the endless pleasures, the carefully maintained perfection, suddenly seemed like an elaborate denial of truth. How could he continue to live in such willful ignorance now that he had seen what life actually contained? But then came the fourth sight, and this one was different. An old man, yes, but walking with such peace, such dignity, such evident inner calm that he seemed to glow from within. His head was shaved, his robes were simple, and he carried nothing but a small bowl. Yet, there was something about his presence that spoke of a freedom that had nothing to do with palaces or possessions. "Who is that?" Siddhartha asked, feeling drawn to this figure in a way he couldn't explain. "A holy man, my lord. Someone who has renounced worldly life to seek understanding about the nature of suffering. He seeks to understand why beings suffer and whether there might be a way beyond suffering." In that moment, everything crystallized for Siddhartha. He had seen the problem, the unavoidable realities of aging, sickness, and death that touch every life. And he had seen that someone, somewhere, believed there might be a solution. Not a denial of these realities, not a distraction from them, but an understanding so deep that one could face them with peace. The ride back to the palace was silent. Siddhartha looked at the familiar luxury with completely new eyes. The flowers were still beautiful, but now he knew they would wilt. The music was still sweet, but now he understood it was trying to cover the sound of time passing. The faces around him were still young and vibrant, but now he could see the aging, sickness, and death that awaited them all. He couldn't unsee what he had seen. More importantly, he couldn't unknow what he now knew about the nature of existence. The beautiful cage was no longer beautiful. It was simply a cage. And the questions that had been quietly stirring in his heart were now roaring with the force of awakened understanding. That night, he made a decision that shocked everyone. In the depths of that transformative night, while the palace slept in its perfumed silence, Siddhartha lay awake, staring at the ceiling he had known since childhood. The golden decorations that had once delighted him now felt like beautiful bars across his vision. Every luxury around him seemed to whisper the same question: how can you enjoy this when you know what awaits every human being? The weight of what he had witnessed that day pressed against his chest. Aging, sickness, death. These weren't distant possibilities or abstract concepts anymore. They were the hidden foundation underneath every moment of palace life. Every laugh, every feast, every pleasure was taking place on top of these inevitable realities. But it was the image of the peaceful monk that kept returning to him. That sense of inner freedom, that quality of being completely at ease with existence as it actually is. If such peace was possible in the face of life's harsh realities, then perhaps there was something to understand that went beyond either denial or despair. Near midnight, something crystallized in Siddhartha's heart with absolute clarity. He could not continue living in willful ignorance, no matter how beautiful that ignorance might be. He could not pretend that pleasure and comfort were adequate responses to the profound questions that life itself was asking. If there was a way to understand suffering deeply enough to transcend it, he had to find that way. Moving with the quiet determination of someone whose mind is completely made up, he rose from his bed. He looked once more at his sleeping wife, an infant son, his heart breaking with love and the pain of what he was about to do. This wasn't a rejection of them, but a quest that might ultimately serve them and all beings. How could he be a true husband and father if he didn't understand the most basic questions of existence? He shed his royal robes, those silk garments that had marked his privilege since birth. He removed his jeweled crown, the symbol of the power and responsibility he was renouncing. In their place, he put on the simple cloth of a wandering seeker. With nothing but determination and an unshakable commitment to finding answers, he walked out of the palace gates forever. The contrast was stark and immediate. From the most comfortable life imaginable to the uncertainty of seeking truth without any guarantee of finding it. From being served by hundreds to serving only the deepest calling of his heart. From having every desire fulfilled to embracing the complete unknown. But there was something liberating in this radical simplicity. For the first time in his life, Siddhartha was free to investigate existence without the buffer of luxury, without the distraction of pleasure, without the comfortable lies that wealth could purchase. He was finally face to face with life as it actually is. He sought out every spiritual teacher he could find. Masters of meditation who could enter states of consciousness so refined they seemed to touch the divine. Philosophers who had spent lifetimes contemplating the nature of reality. Ascetics who believed that punishing the body would liberate the spirit. For 6 years, he threw himself into every practice with complete dedication. He learned to meditate so deeply that he could remain motionless for hours, his consciousness absorbed in states of bliss and clarity. He studied with the most renowned teachers of his time, mastering their methods with remarkable speed. He practiced extreme austerities, reducing his food intake until his body became skeletal, believing that suffering in the body might free the mind. But gradually, a troubling pattern emerged. Every method no matter how profound, seemed to lead to temporary states rather than permanent understanding, the blissful meditations would end, leaving him with the same fundamental questions. The philosophical insights, while beautiful, didn't touch the core of what he was seeking to understand. The extreme asceticism weakened his body without strengthening his wisdom. He began to realize that neither the extreme indulgence of his palace life nor the extreme denial of ascetic practice was leading him toward the truth he sought. Both were forms of running away from the actual experience of being human. One ran toward pleasure, the other ran from it, but neither was willing to sit still and investigate what was actually happening in the heart of human experience. Near the end of his 6th year of searching, exhausted by methods that promised everything but delivered only temporary relief, Siddhartha found himself by a river. He was so weakened by years of extreme practices that he could barely stand. And in that moment of complete physical and spiritual exhaustion, something shifted. He realized he needed to find a completely different approach. He accepted food from a kind woman who offered it, nourishing his body back to health. He bathed in the river, washing away the dust and grime of years of seeking, and with his strength returning, he made his way to a large tree where he sat down with the deepest intention he had ever held. For 6 years, he had searched everywhere outside himself for the answer to suffering. Now, he would sit under this tree and look directly into the nature of his own mind until he either found the truth he was seeking or died in the attempt. For 6 years, he searched. Then came the night that changed humanity. As the sun began to set on what would become the most significant night in human spiritual history, Siddhartha settled beneath a large fig tree with a resolve unlike anything he had ever felt before. This wasn't the determination of someone trying one more technique or following one more teacher. This was the quiet, unshakable commitment of someone who had finally understood that the answer, if it existed at all, lay not in external methods, but in the direct investigation of consciousness itself. He had tried everything the spiritual world of his time could offer. Extreme pleasure, extreme deprivation, profound meditation states, philosophical inquiry, ascetic practices that pushed the body to its limits. All of them had provided glimpses, temporary relief, momentary insights. But none had touched the root of the restlessness that drives all human seeking. So he sat with a promise that resonates across the centuries. I will not rise from this spot until I understand the nature of suffering and find the path to its end. Not as a dramatic vow, but as the simple, inevitable next step of someone who had run out of everywhere else to look. As night deepened around him, Siddhartha turned his attention inward with a quality of investigation he had never applied before. Instead of trying to achieve any particular state or escape from his current experience, he simply began to observe. What was actually happening in this moment? What was the nature of the mind that was seeking? What was the root of the dissatisfaction that no external circumstance seemed able to satisfy? He watched his thoughts arise and pass away like clouds in an empty sky. He observed desires emerging, demanding attention, then dissolving when not fed by engagement. He noticed how the mind constantly created stories about past and future, rarely resting in the simple reality of what was actually present. But more than observing, he began to see through the assumption that happiness comes from getting what we want, through the belief that suffering is something that happens to us, rather than something we add to what happens to us. Through the illusion that there's a solid self that experiences all of this, rather than simply experiencing flowing through awareness itself. As the hours passed, layers of misunderstanding that had shaped not just his own life, but all human life, began to fall away. The mechanism of suffering became as clear as daylight. The way craving creates dissatisfaction, the way attachment to impermanent things guarantees disappointment, the way the constant seeking for something better prevents appreciation of what already is. And then, as dawn broke over the horizon, something extraordinary occurred. Not a mystical experience or supernatural event, but the simplest and most profound recognition possible: the cessation of the seeking itself. The end of the inner argument with reality that had driven his entire life. The falling away of the very mechanism that creates psychological suffering. In that moment, Siddhartha became the Buddha. Not because he gained something new, but because he saw through the illusions that had been creating the sense that something was missing. Buddha simply means awakened one. Someone who has woken up from the dream of separation, the dream of inadequacy, the dream that happiness lies somewhere other than in clear seeing of what is. He had discovered something that would transform how human beings understand the nature of contentment forever. Not a philosophy or belief system, but a direct seeing into how consciousness works when it's not caught in the endless loop of wanting things to be different. For 7 days, he remained under that tree, integrating this profound shift in understanding. And when he finally rose, he carried with him not just personal liberation, but a path that any human being could walk toward the same freedom. What he discovered that night, about the nature of suffering, about the possibility of its end, about the simple shifts in understanding that make this freedom accessible to anyone, is going to change everything you think you know about what it means to be truly happy. What the Buddha saw that night wasn't pessimistic or depressing. It was simply honest about the human condition. His first insight acknowledged something we all know in our hearts, but often try to avoid. Life contains suffering. But this isn't the kind of dramatic suffering we see in movies. Yes, it includes the obvious forms: illness, aging, death, losing people we love, not getting things we desperately want. But it also includes something much more subtle and pervasive. Even our happiest moments carry a kind of gentle ache. The sunset is beautiful, but it's setting. The vacation is wonderful, but it will end. The relationship brings joy, but nothing stays exactly the same forever. There's a bittersweet quality to even our most precious experiences, because we know they're impermanent. This is what the Buddha called dukkha, often translated as suffering, but perhaps better understood as a fundamental unsatisfactoriness that touches all conditioned existence. It's like trying to get comfortable on a chair that's slightly too hard or too soft. You can adjust your position, add cushions, change chairs entirely, but there's always something just a little bit off. The Buddha wasn't asking us to become pessimistic about life. He was inviting us to become realistic about it, to stop pretending that if we just arrange our circumstances correctly, we'll finally achieve lasting satisfaction. To recognize that the impermanent nature of all experience means that using impermanent things as the foundation for permanent happiness is like building a house on shifting sand. This recognition isn't meant to discourage us. It's meant to free us from the exhausting project of trying to make an inherently unstable situation stable. When we truly accept that some degree of uncertainty and change is woven into the fabric of existence, we can stop fighting reality and start learning how to dance with it. This insight is like a doctor's diagnosis. Before we can treat any condition, we need to accurately understand what we're dealing with. The Buddha was simply pointing out that the human condition includes unavoidable encounters with impermanence, uncertainty, and loss. Once we stop trying to deny this reality, we can begin to respond to it with wisdom rather than futile resistance. But here's where the Buddha's insight becomes truly revolutionary. The unavoidable difficulties of life, aging, loss, uncertainty, are actually only a small part of our total suffering. Most of our anguish comes not from what happens to us, but from how we relate to what happens to us. His second realization revealed that we create layers of additional suffering through what he called tanha, literally thirst or craving. This isn't just wanting things. This is the compulsive, desperate quality of wanting that makes us feel like our well-being depends on getting or avoiding specific experiences. There are 3 types of this thirst. First, craving for sensual pleasures. The belief that the right combination of pleasant experiences will finally satisfy us. Second, craving for existence or becoming. The drive to be someone special, to achieve, to matter, to become more than we currently are. Third, craving for non-existence. The desire to escape, to not feel what we're feeling, to annihilate whatever is causing us discomfort. Notice how exhausting this is. We're constantly in motion, grasping toward what we want, pushing away what we don't want, trying to become something different than what we are. It's like being caught in an internal storm that never stops. But here's the tender part. None of this craving is bad or wrong. It's the most natural response to feeling incomplete or unsafe. We reach for pleasure because it temporarily soothes our discomfort. We strive to become more because we hope it will finally make us feel worthy. We try to escape because what we're experiencing feels unbearable. The problem isn't that we have these responses. The problem is that they don't actually solve the underlying issue. They're like taking a painkiller for a broken bone. They provide temporary relief, but they don't address the root cause. In fact, they often make the situation worse by reinforcing the belief that our peace depends on external circumstances being just right. This understanding isn't asking us to stop wanting things or stop caring about outcomes. It's revealing that when wanting becomes desperate need, when preferences become demands, when hopes become attachment, that's when we create suffering on top of whatever difficulty we're already facing. And now comes the Buddha's great gift of hope. His third insight announces that the suffering we create through craving and attachment is not permanent, not inevitable, and not intrinsic to human nature. It can end completely. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or detached from life. It's about discovering a way of engaging with experience that doesn't create the internal friction we've been mistaking for normal. Imagine what it would feel like to want things without the desperate edge, to care deeply without the anxiety, to love fully without the fear of loss dominating the love itself. The Buddha called this state nirvana, literally meaning extinguishing or cooling. What gets extinguished isn't life or feeling or engagement. What cools down are the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that keep us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. This isn't a distant goal reserved for special people. It's the natural result of clearly seeing how suffering is created and then simply not creating it that way anymore. Like learning that you've been accidentally touching a hot stove and then simply moving your hand away. The relief isn't something you have to achieve. It's what naturally happens when you stop doing what was causing the problem. People who have touched this freedom describe it as an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A contentment that isn't disturbed by getting or not getting what they want. A love that isn't diminished by the possibility of loss. An engagement with life that's fully present but not desperately attached. This isn't a feeling that comes and goes. It's more like discovering that the sky of your consciousness was always peaceful. You had just been so focused on the weather passing through it that you forgot the sky itself was unchanged by every storm. This understanding promises that such discovery is available to every human being, not through gaining something new, but through releasing what was never serving us in the first place. And this brings us to his fourth and most practical insight. The Buddha didn't just point out the problem and the possibility of its solution. He mapped out a specific, walkable path that anyone can follow toward this freedom. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. 8 interconnected ways of living that gradually purify the heart and clarify the mind. It's not a linear sequence you follow step by step, but more like 8 spokes of a wheel that all support each other in moving you forward. The path addresses every aspect of human life. How you see and understand reality, what motivates your choices, how you speak to others, how you act in the world, how you make a living, how you direct your mental energy, how you pay attention to your experience, how you cultivate inner stillness. What's beautiful about this path is that it's completely practical. You don't need to believe anything or join anything or change your life dramatically to begin walking it. You can start exactly where you are, with whatever circumstances you're currently facing. Each element of the path can be practiced in the context of ordinary life, work, relationships, daily challenges, quiet moments alone. The Buddha called this the middle way because it avoids extremes. Not the extreme indulgence that tries to solve problems through pleasure, and not the extreme denial that tries to solve them through deprivation. Instead, it's a balanced approach that addresses the root causes of suffering with wisdom, compassion, and steady practice. This isn't about becoming perfect or achieving some superhuman state. It's about gradually training the heart and mind in ways that naturally reduce the creation of unnecessary suffering. Like learning any skill, it takes practice and patience. But unlike other skills, every step along this path brings immediate benefits. More peace, more clarity, more genuine contentment with life as it is. But here's where it gets really practical. These 8 aspects of the path aren't abstract principles to think about. They're specific ways of engaging with every moment of your daily life that transform ordinary experience into opportunities for awakening. There's a teaching that the Buddha shared that changes everything once you truly understand it. He spoke of a person who gets struck by an arrow. The first arrow causes immediate, unavoidable pain. This represents the inevitable difficulties of life, the things that happen to us that we can't control. But then, he said, most people immediately strike themselves with a second arrow. This second arrow is our reaction to the first arrow. The story we tell ourselves about what the pain means, the way we resist what's happening, our desperate search for something to make it go away. And here's what's so profound. The second arrow often causes far more suffering than the first one ever could. But there's something even more subtle happening that the Buddha noticed. When we're struck by that first arrow, when we feel lonely, bored, anxious, restless, or any kind of discomfort, our immediate instinct is to reach for something pleasant to soothe it. Not because we particularly want that pleasant thing, but because we desperately want to stop feeling the unpleasant thing. He described this beautifully. The ordinary person, when touched with a feeling of pain, delights in sensual pleasure. Why is that? Because the ordinary person does not discern any escape from painful feeling aside from sensual pleasure. In other words, when we're uncomfortable, the only solution we know is to find something that feels good. But here's where it gets fascinating. The Buddha used a metaphor that, once you really see it, changes how you understand most of human behavior. He compared this to having an itch and scratching it. Think about this for a moment. Having an itch is unpleasant. Scratching, it feels momentarily pleasant. But the pleasure of scratching isn't actually pleasure in any pure sense. It's simply the brief relief of irritation. If there were no itch, vigorously scraping your skin wouldn't feel good at all. It might even hurt. The pleasure exists only in relationship to the prior discomfort. Remove the itch, and the scratching becomes meaningless, even unpleasant. Now, here's where this becomes revolutionary. What if most of what we call happiness in our lives is actually just scratching? What if we've been mistaking the relief of discomfort for genuine joy? Look at something as simple as checking your phone when you're bored. The boredom is the itch, that restless, slightly uncomfortable feeling of not being stimulated. Reaching for the phone and scrolling through social media is the scratch. It feels pleasant, but only because it temporarily relieves the underlying restlessness. But notice what happens. The relief doesn't last. Soon you're putting the phone down, and if the boredom was the only reason you picked it up, the boredom returns. So you reach for the phone again. Itch, scratch, temporary relief. Itch returns. Scratch again. Or consider comfort eating when you're feeling emotional. The sadness or stress or loneliness is the itch. The food is the scratch. For a few moments while you're eating something delicious, the emotional discomfort recedes. But unless the food actually addressed what was causing the sadness, the uncomfortable feeling returns, often accompanied by new discomfort about having eaten when you weren't really hungry. Shopping, when you're feeling empty or insecure, follows the same pattern. The emptiness is the itch, the purchase is the scratch. There's genuine pleasure in buying something new, especially something you've wanted. But if you're honest, how long does that satisfaction typically last before you're looking for the next thing to buy? The Buddha told a story that illustrates this perfectly. Imagine you haven't eaten all day and you're genuinely hungry. You sit down to eat a delicious meal, let's say pizza, and oh, that first bite is incredible. The relief from hunger, the satisfaction of taste, the pleasure of finally giving your body what it needs. But what happens if you keep eating? The second slice is still good, maybe the third. But somewhere along the way, if you continue eating past the point of hunger, something shifts. The same food that was bringing pleasure starts to bring discomfort. You feel overly full, maybe a little nauseous, definitely sluggish. A Tibetan teacher once observed, when we began to eat, it brought relief from the suffering of hunger, and we labeled it pleasure. But as the discomfort of continuous eating became gross, we changed the label and called it suffering. What was pleasurable had become plain suffering. All that happened was that one suffering stopped, another suffering began. This reveals something profound about the nature of what we call pleasure. It wasn't that heavenly happiness somehow transformed into suffering out of nowhere. Rather, the relief of hunger could only last so long before it tipped into the discomfort of overeating. The underlying mechanism was always the same, seeking relief from discomfort. This pattern applies to virtually every pleasure we pursue. The hot bath feels wonderful when you're cold and tense, but stay too long and you become overheated and pruny. The massage feels amazing when your muscles are tight, but continue indefinitely, and it becomes irritating. The vacation is delightful when you're burned out from work, but extend it indefinitely, and you start to feel restless and purposeless. None of this means pleasure is bad, or that we should avoid enjoyable experiences. It simply means that pleasure cannot stand on its own as lasting fulfillment. It is always in dynamic relationship with its opposite, like two sides of a coin. We spend much of our lives oscillating between the two, seeking relief, getting it temporarily, then seeking it again. What makes this insight so powerful is recognizing how much of what we call happiness is actually just this relief mechanism. The happiness of getting promoted at work. How much of that is relief from the anxiety of not being recognized? The happiness of a relationship working out. How much is relief from the fear of being alone? The happiness of a purchase. How much is relief from the discomfort of wanting something we don't have? This doesn't diminish these experiences or make them meaningless, but it does reveal why they can't serve as the foundation for lasting contentment. They're designed to be temporary solutions to temporary problems. When we ask them to provide permanent satisfaction, we're asking them to do something they were never designed to do. The Buddha's insight goes even deeper. He noticed that this constant scratching actually reinforces the itching. Every time we respond to discomfort by reaching for external relief, we strengthen the belief that discomfort is a problem that needs to be fixed, rather than a natural part of experience that can be met with awareness. It's like being afraid of silence and always needing background noise. The more we avoid silence, the more uncomfortable it becomes. The more we scratch the itch of discomfort, the more sensitive we become to any form of unease. We actually train ourselves to need more and more external soothing for smaller and smaller irritations. But here's the beautiful paradox. When we start to see this pattern clearly, when we recognize how much of our pleasure seeking is actually discomfort avoidance, something wonderful begins to happen. We can start to relate to both pleasure and discomfort differently. Not as enemies to defeat or prizes to capture, but as natural phenomena arising and passing in the space of awareness. Once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. And that seeing itself begins to free you from the compulsive need to scratch every itch, to fix every discomfort, to chase every pleasure. A different kind of satisfaction becomes possible, one that doesn't depend on the constant management of your emotional state. There's something so beautiful about finally understanding why all our efforts to be happy have felt like chasing something that stays just out of reach. It's not because we're doing it wrong, or because we're not trying hard enough, or because we haven't found the right technique or circumstance. It's because happiness, as we typically understand it, is fundamentally different from what our hearts are actually seeking. When most of us think about happiness, we imagine a feeling, a positive emotional state, a sense of joy or pleasure or satisfaction that we can experience and hopefully maintain. We picture ourselves feeling good, feeling content, feeling excited about life. And there's nothing wrong with any of these feelings. They're genuinely beautiful aspects of human experience. But here's what we've discovered together. Feelings, by their very nature, are temporary. They arise, they peak, they fade, they transform into other feelings. This isn't a flaw in the system. It's how feelings work. Trying to make a temporary phenomenon permanent is like trying to freeze a river. You might succeed for a moment, but you fundamentally change the nature of what you're trying to preserve. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps and went on to become a renowned psychiatrist, understood this deeply. He wrote, "Happiness cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue as a byproduct of addressing more meaningful things." In other words, when we make happiness our target, we almost guarantee that we'll miss it. But when we aim for something deeper, meaning, service, understanding, happiness often appears naturally as a side effect. This points to something the Buddha understood with remarkable clarity. What we're actually seeking isn't a particular feeling that we can capture and keep. What we're seeking is freedom from the constant inner weather that makes us feel like we need to capture and keep feelings in the first place. Think of it this way. Your consciousness is like the sky, vast and open, and essentially unchanging. Emotions, thoughts, sensations, experiences. These are like weather patterns moving through that sky. Sometimes the weather is stormy, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's brilliantly sunny. Now, imagine if the sky was constantly worried about what kind of weather was passing through it. If it was desperately trying to hold on to the sunny days and push away the storms. If it was always trying to change itself to make the weather different. The sky would be exhausted, wouldn't it? And ultimately unsuccessful, because weather is what weather does. It moves, it changes, it flows through. But the sky doesn't do this. The sky remains spacious and open, allowing all weather to pass through without being disturbed by any of it. Rain doesn't make the sky wet. Wind doesn't make the sky move. Clouds don't make the sky cloudy. The sky holds all of it with the same vast, peaceful presence. This is what the Buddha discovered that night under the Bodhi tree. Not a way to control the weather of experience, but a way to recognize the sky-like nature of awareness itself. A way to find peace not by getting the right emotions, but by resting in the spaciousness that can hold any emotion without being overwhelmed by it. This is what he called freedom. Not freedom from having difficult experiences. That's impossible, as long as we're human. But freedom from the suffering we add to difficult experiences by fighting them, resisting them, or trying to make them different than they are. And freedom from the suffering we add to pleasant experiences by desperately trying to make them last longer than they naturally do. Freedom from the constant inner commentary that judges every moment as good or bad, wanted or unwanted, right or wrong. This kind of freedom is remarkably stable. Unlike happiness, which depends on circumstances aligning in particular ways, freedom is available regardless of what's happening. You can access this sky-like awareness, whether you're going through the best day of your life or the most challenging. It doesn't require anything external to be different than it is. People who have touched this freedom describe it in ways that sound almost paradoxical. They talk about being more fully alive to both joy and sorrow, more present with both pleasure and pain. They describe a kind of contentment that isn't disturbed by not getting what they want, and a love that isn't diminished by the possibility of loss. This isn't emotional numbness or detachment from life. If anything, it's the opposite. When you're not constantly managing your emotional state, when you're not always trying to push away discomfort and grasp after pleasure, you have so much more energy available for actually living. For being present with what's here, for responding wisely to what's needed, for loving without the fear of loss, dominating the love itself. What's remarkable is how this shifts your relationship to happiness itself. When you're no longer desperately chasing it, happiness becomes more free to arise naturally. When you're no longer afraid of losing it, you can actually enjoy it while it's here. When you know your well-being doesn't depend on maintaining any particular emotional state, every pleasant moment becomes a gift rather than something you need to cling to. This freedom isn't a distant goal or mystical achievement. It's what naturally emerges when we understand how suffering is actually created and simply stop creating it in those ways. like learning that you've been accidentally leaning against a hot stove and then simply stepping away. The relief isn't something you have to achieve. It's what happens when you stop doing what was causing the problem. But how do we actually make this shift? How do we move from the exhausting pursuit of happiness to the sustainable cultivation of freedom? How do we learn to rest in the sky of awareness rather than being tossed around by every change in the weather? The Buddha gave us a roadmap. 8 gentle steps that anyone can walk, regardless of their circumstances or background. 8 interconnected ways of living that naturally cultivate this sky-like freedom in the midst of ordinary life. The first step on this path of freedom begins with something beautifully simple: learning to see clearly. This is what the Buddha called right view, and it's not about having the correct opinions or believing the right things. It's about developing the capacity to see life as it actually is, rather than through the lens of our hopes, fears, and assumptions. Right view starts with recognizing the 3 characteristics that mark all of existence. First, impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing stays exactly the same forever. This isn't a philosophical concept to understand intellectually, but a lived reality to notice moment by moment. Your thoughts are changing. Your emotions are flowing. Your body is constantly in subtle motion. Even your sense of self shifts throughout the day. But recognizing impermanence goes deeper than just noticing that things change. It's about understanding how our resistance to this fundamental truth creates so much of our suffering. We know, intellectually, that nothing lasts forever, yet we live as if our current job, relationship, or living situation should remain exactly as it is. When change inevitably comes, we suffer not just from the change itself, but from our expectation that it shouldn't be happening. Right view helps us see this pattern clearly. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of fighting the reality of the situation, you can recognize this is impermanent. This traffic jam is not a permanent feature of the universe. My frustration with it is also impermanent. What would it be like to simply be present with this changing situation without adding the story that it shouldn't be this way? The second characteristic is dukkha, that subtle unsatisfactoriness we've been exploring together. Right view helps us see how this isn't a personal failing or a sign that something is wrong with us. It's simply how conditional existence works. When we try to find permanent satisfaction in impermanent experiences, some degree of dissatisfaction is inevitable. This understanding is actually liberating because it stops us from taking our restlessness so personally or thinking we need to fix ourselves to feel complete. The third characteristic is often the most challenging to understand: anatta, or not self. This doesn't mean you don't exist, or that your personal experience doesn't matter. It means that the solid, unchanging self we assume we are, separate from everything else, controlling our thoughts and experiences, is actually a construction rather than a reality. In daily life, you can explore this gently. When a thought arises, where did it come from? When you feel angry, where exactly is the anger located? When you're having a conversation, who is really listening? Right view invites a curious, gentle investigation into the nature of selfhood without requiring you to believe anything in particular. Right view also encompasses understanding karma, not as some cosmic reward and punishment system, but as the simple recognition that actions have consequences. When you speak harshly, it affects both the person receiving those words and your own inner state. When you act with kindness, it creates ripples of well-being that extend beyond what you can see. Right view helps you see these connections clearly, making wise choices more natural and obvious. Cultivating right view is like cleaning the lens through which you see the world. Gradually, you begin to see the difference between what's actually happening and the stories you tell yourself about what's happening. This creates space for wisdom to emerge, space for responses that serve your deeper well-being rather than just your immediate impulses. But seeing clearly is only the beginning. The next aspect of the path addresses what drives our choices and actions. This is right intention, the compass of the heart. Right intention isn't about having pure motives every moment. That would be impossible for most of us. It's about gradually aligning our deepest intentions with what actually serves freedom and well-being. The Buddha spoke of 3 specific intentions that support this path: the intention of renunciation, the intention of goodwill, and the intention of harmlessness. The intention of renunciation sounds austere, but it's actually deeply liberating. It's the willingness to let go of what doesn't serve us, even when it's pleasant or familiar. This might mean releasing the compulsive need to check your phone every few minutes, or letting go of the habit of complaining about things you can't change. It's choosing freedom over the comfortable prison of old patterns. Renunciation doesn't mean depriving yourself of joy or becoming ascetic. It means becoming conscious about what truly nourishes you versus what merely provides temporary escape or distraction. Sometimes renunciation looks like saying no to the 3rd glass of wine because you notice it makes you feel heavy and disconnected. Sometimes it's choosing to have a difficult conversation rather than avoiding it through busyness or entertainment. The intention of goodwill is the sincere wish for the well-being of all beings, including yourself. This doesn't mean being artificially positive or pretending to love everyone equally. It means cultivating a basic friendliness toward life, a willingness to wish others well, even when they're difficult, and a commitment to acting from kindness whenever possible. Developing goodwill often starts with yourself. Notice how you speak to yourself internally throughout the day. Are your thoughts encouraging and supportive, or critical and harsh? The intention of goodwill includes learning to be a good friend to yourself, patient with your mistakes, encouraging of your efforts, forgiving of your human limitations. This self-compassion then naturally extends to others. Practicing goodwill doesn't mean being naive about harmful behavior or failing to set appropriate boundaries. You can wish someone well while also protecting yourself from their dysfunction. You can feel compassion for someone's pain while still holding them accountable for their actions. Goodwill is about the fundamental attitude of the heart, not about specific behaviors in every situation. The intention of harmlessness naturally flows from the first 2. When you're committed to letting go of what creates suffering and cultivating what promotes well-being, the desire to cause harm to others or yourself begins to feel increasingly foreign to your nature. Harmlessness extends beyond obvious forms of violence to include the subtle ways we can cause harm through our words, attitudes, and energy. Sometimes harmlessness means choosing not to share gossip that would damage someone's reputation. Sometimes it means recognizing when your own emotional state is agitated and taking time to settle before engaging with others. Sometimes it's as simple as driving more patiently or walking more gently on the earth. In practice, right intention might look like pausing before you speak to ask yourself, what do I really want to accomplish with these words? Or setting an intention at the beginning of each day to respond to difficulties with patience rather than reactivity. It's the ongoing practice of aligning your choices with your deepest values rather than your momentary impulses. These intentions naturally express themselves through how we communicate with others. Right speech is the practice of using words in ways that heal rather than harm, that connect rather than divide, that serve truth rather than ego. The Buddha was specific about what constitutes right speech. It means abstaining from lying, from speech that creates division between people, from harsh or abusive language, and from frivolous talk that serves no beneficial purpose. But more than just avoiding harmful speech, right speech is about actively using words to promote understanding, harmony, and well-being. Let's explore each of these more deeply. Abstaining from lying includes not just outright falsehoods, but also the subtle ways we distort truth to serve our ego or avoid discomfort. This might mean admitting when you don't know something rather than pretending expertise, or acknowledging your role in a problem rather than deflecting all responsibility, or being honest about your feelings even when it's vulnerable to do so. Avoiding divisive speech means not saying things that create unnecessary conflict or separation between people. This doesn't mean never disagreeing with anyone or avoiding all controversial topics. It means speaking about differences in ways that promote understanding rather than entrenchment. It means not gossiping in ways that damage relationships or create factions and alliances based on shared judgments of others. Refraining from harsh speech includes obvious things like not yelling, insulting, or verbally attacking others. But it also includes the subtle harshness of sarcasm used as a weapon, the cruelty of withholding words of appreciation when they're deserved, or the violence of speaking to someone as if they're not fully human. Right speech cultivates a basic respect for the dignity of every person you encounter. Avoiding frivolous talk doesn't mean never being playful or light-hearted. It means being conscious about when conversation serves connection and understanding versus when it's just filling space or avoiding intimacy. Sometimes, silence is more supportive than speech. Sometimes deep listening is more valuable than clever responses. Right speech includes knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. In our digital age, right speech extends far beyond face-to-face conversations. Every text message, email, social media post, and online comment becomes an opportunity to practice. Before hitting send, you might ask yourself, is this true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? These three questions can transform not just your communication, but your relationships and your inner sense of integrity. Right speech also includes the quality of listening. Speaking wisely becomes much easier when you're truly hearing what others are trying to communicate. When you listen not just to formulate your response, but to understand what's being shared, your words naturally become more appropriate and effective. Deep listening is itself a form of generosity, a gift you give to others that often matters more than any advice or solution you might offer. Perhaps most importantly, right speech includes how you speak to yourself. The internal commentary that runs through your mind all day. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it helpful? Learning to speak to yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend is often the foundation for speaking wisely to others. Right speech creates a foundation of trust and safety that allows deeper aspects of the path to flourish. When people know they can trust your words, when they feel safe in your presence, communication becomes a vehicle for genuine connection rather than just an exchange of information. This foundation of integrity in speech naturally extends to integrity in action. Right action is the practice of living in alignment with your values, of making choices that promote well-being and avoid causing unnecessary harm. The Buddha outlined specific guidelines for right action, refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. But like all aspects of the path, these aren't rigid rules imposed from outside. They're recognitions of what naturally supports inner peace and harmonious relationships. Refraining from killing extends beyond the obvious to include a reverence for all life. This might mean catching a spider and releasing it outside rather than squashing it, or choosing foods that involve less harm to animals when possible. It's about cultivating a sensitivity to the impact of your actions on other living beings. Some people interpret this strictly and become vegetarian or vegan, while others apply it more broadly as a general principle of reducing harm wherever practical. The principle behind not killing is really about developing compassion and recognizing the interconnectedness of all life. When you truly understand that your well-being and others' well-being are intimately connected, causing unnecessary harm begins to feel as senseless as hitting yourself. This doesn't require perfect adherence to any particular diet or lifestyle, but rather a growing sensitivity to the effects of your choices. Not stealing includes the obvious forms of taking what doesn't belong to you, but it goes much deeper. It includes not taking more than you need, not wasting resources, being scrupulously honest in financial dealings, and not taking credit for others' work. It's about living with a sense of gratitude and sufficiency, rather than entitlement and greed. In practical terms, this might mean paying for software instead of using pirated versions, giving proper attribution when you use someone else's ideas, or not taking office supplies home for personal use. It includes being honest about your hours when you're paid by the hour, returning money when you're given too much change, and not padding expense reports. These small acts of integrity create a foundation of trustworthiness that affects every area of your life. Sexual conduct that avoids misconduct is based on respect, honesty, and consideration for others' well-being. It means not using sexual energy in ways that exploit or harm others, honoring commitments in relationships, and ensuring that intimate connections are based on mutual care and consent. This applies whether you're single, married, or in any other relationship configuration. Right action in sexual conduct also includes being honest about your intentions and feelings, treating intimate partners with kindness and respect, even when relationships are ending, and not using sexuality as a way to avoid emotional intimacy or manipulate others. It's about bringing the same consciousness and integrity to physical intimacy that you bring to other important areas of your life. In modern life, right action might also include considerations about environmental impact, consumer choices, and how we use technology. Each purchase, each decision about how to spend time, each choice about what to support with your attention and resources becomes an expression of your values. This doesn't require perfection, but rather an increasing awareness of how your actions ripple out into the world. The beautiful thing about right action is how it creates a sense of inner cleanliness and self-respect. When you know that your actions align with your deepest values, there's a natural confidence and peace that emerges. You don't have to hide from anyone or make excuses for how you've lived. This integrity becomes a source of strength and clarity in facing life's challenges. Right action naturally extends to how you earn your living. Right livelihood is the practice of making a living in ways that don't cause harm to others and ideally contribute to the well-being of the world. The Buddha specifically mentioned certain occupations to avoid: trading in weapons, living beings, slavery, meat, alcohol, and poison. In modern terms, this extends to any work that directly profits from causing suffering or exploiting others' vulnerabilities. But right livelihood isn't just about what to avoid. It's about finding ways to make your daily work an expression of your spiritual values. This doesn't mean everyone needs to become a teacher, therapist, or social worker. A carpenter building homes with integrity, a nurse caring for patients with compassion, a business owner treating employees fairly, an artist creating beauty that uplifts the human spirit. Any occupation can become right livelihood when approached with the right intention and executed with care for others' well-being. For many people, transitioning to right livelihood happens gradually. You might start by bringing more mindfulness and compassion to whatever work you're currently doing. This could mean being more patient with difficult customers, more supportive of struggling colleagues, or more honest in your dealings with clients. Then perhaps making small changes, refusing to participate in practices you find unethical, or simplifying your lifestyle so you have more freedom to choose meaningful work over just lucrative work. Some people discover that they can transform their current job into right livelihood by changing how they approach it. A salesperson might focus on genuinely helping customers find what they need, rather than just maximizing profit. A manager might prioritize creating a supportive work environment over just meeting quotas. A teacher might bring more patience and creativity to their classroom. Others find that they need to make more significant changes, perhaps retraining for a different career or starting their own business based on their values. The key is to move in the direction of greater alignment between your values and your work, understanding that this is often a gradual process rather than a sudden transformation. Right livelihood also includes how you relate to money and possessions. It's about earning honestly, spending mindfully, saving wisely, and sharing generously. When your relationship with money is aligned with your values, work becomes less about accumulating wealth and more about contributing to the world in ways that feel meaningful. This might mean choosing to live more simply, so you can work fewer hours and have more time for what matters most to you. Or it might mean earning more so you can support causes you care about or help family members who are struggling. The point isn't to have any particular relationship with money, but to have a conscious relationship with it. The practice of right livelihood often reveals how much freedom is possible when you align your external life with your internal values. Many people discover that they need far less than they thought to be content, which opens up possibilities for work that serves their hearts rather than just their bank accounts. All of these external practices, clear seeing, wise intention, skillful speech, ethical action, and meaningful livelihood, create the foundation for the more internal aspects of the path. Right effort is where we turn our attention to the cultivation of beneficial mental states and the gentle release of what doesn't serve us. Right effort isn't about forcing yourself to be positive or trying to muscle your way to enlightenment. It's about the art of gentle persistence, the kind of effort that's sustainable over time because it works with your natural wisdom rather than against it. The Buddha described 4 types of right effort. First, the effort to prevent unwholesome mental states from arising. This might mean choosing not to watch news that you know will leave you anxious and agitated, or declining to engage in gossip that creates division and judgment. It's about being mindful of what you feed your mind, just as you might be mindful of what you feed your body. This preventive aspect of right effort requires developing awareness of your mental diet. What books do you read? What shows do you watch? What conversations do you seek out? What social media accounts do you follow? All of these choices shape your mental landscape. Right effort means making conscious choices about what influences you expose yourself to. This doesn't mean avoiding all challenging or difficult content, but rather being intentional about how and when you engage with it. You might choose to read news at a specific time of day rather than checking constantly, or to watch educational content about difficult topics rather than sensationalized entertainment. The goal is to remain informed and engaged with the world while protecting your mental well-being. Second, the effort to abandon unwholesome mental states that have already arisen. When you notice anger, jealousy, or despair taking root in your consciousness, right effort involves gently redirecting your attention towards something more beneficial. This isn't suppression or denial. It's more like choosing to water the flowers in your garden rather than the weeds. This aspect of effort requires developing skill in working with difficult emotions when they arise. Sometimes, this means taking a few deep breaths and counting to 10 before responding to someone who has triggered your anger. Sometimes, it means going for a walk when you notice anxiety building, or calling a friend when loneliness threatens to spiral into depression. The key is learning to respond to difficult mental states skillfully, rather than just being overwhelmed by them. One effective technique is to mentally note what's happening. Anger is present, or worry is arising. This creates a little space between you and the emotion, making it easier to choose how to respond. You might then ask yourself, what does this emotion need right now? Sometimes, anger needs the boundary setting of clear communication. Sometimes, sadness needs the comfort of self-compassion. Sometimes, anxiety needs the grounding of slow, deep breathing. Third, the effort to cultivate wholesome mental states that haven't yet arisen. This might mean deliberately practicing gratitude when you're feeling ungrateful, or consciously generating compassion when your heart feels closed. It's about actively nurturing the qualities you want to grow in your inner life. This cultivation can be quite practical. If you notice that you tend to focus on what's wrong with your life, you might establish a daily practice of writing down 3 things you're grateful for. If you struggle with self-criticism, you might practice speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a dear friend who was going through the same challenges. If you find it hard to feel compassion for difficult people, you might spend a few minutes each day reflecting on the fact that everyone, like you, just wants to be happy and free from suffering. The key is to start small and be consistent, rather than trying to transform your entire mental landscape overnight. Even a few minutes of conscious cultivation each day can gradually shift your default mental patterns toward greater well-being and wisdom. Fourth, the effort to maintain and strengthen wholesome mental states that are already present. When you notice moments of peace, kindness, or clarity, right effort involves savoring and appreciating these states so they become more familiar and accessible. This is like tending a garden. When you see flowers blooming, you water them and give them attention so they continue to flourish. Many people have the opposite habit. They take positive mental states for granted and focus most of their attention on problems and difficulties. Right effort includes learning to notice and appreciate moments of well-being when they naturally arise. This might mean pausing to really savor your morning coffee, or taking a moment to appreciate the feeling of connection after a good conversation with a friend. The key to right effort is finding the middle way between laziness and overstriving. Too little effort, and nothing changes. You remain stuck in old patterns of reactivity and unconsciousness. Too much effort, and you create tension and burnout. You exhaust yourself trying to force inner transformation. Right effort is like tuning a stringed instrument. Not too tight, not too loose, but just right for creating beautiful music. This quality of balanced effort becomes the foundation for developing clear awareness of your moment-to-moment experience. Right mindfulness is perhaps the most transformative aspect of the entire path, the practice of waking up to your own life. Right mindfulness involves establishing clear, non-reactive awareness in 4 areas of experience. First, mindfulness of the body, becoming aware of physical sensations, posture, movement, and breath, without immediately trying to change or fix anything. Simply noticing what it feels like to inhabit this body moment by moment. Mindfulness of the body might begin with something as simple as noticing the feeling of your feet on the ground as you walk, or the sensation of air moving in and out of your nostrils as you breathe. Throughout the day, you can periodically check in with your body. How are you holding your shoulders? What's the quality of tension or relaxation in your jaw? How does your stomach feel? This isn't about judging or trying to change these sensations, but simply about becoming aware of the rich world of physical experience that's always available. Body awareness can be profoundly grounding, especially when your mind is scattered or agitated. The body exists only in the present moment. It's not worried about tomorrow's meeting or replaying yesterday's conversation. When you bring attention to physical sensations, you naturally anchor yourself in the here and now. Second, mindfulness of feelings. Not emotions, but the basic feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that colors every experience. Learning to notice this subtle level of experience helps you understand your automatic reactions before they become full-blown emotional storms. This feeling tone is always present but usually unconscious. The taste of your morning coffee has a pleasant feeling tone. The sound of traffic outside might have an unpleasant feeling tone. The feeling of sitting in your chair might be neutral. When you become aware of these subtle colorings of experience, you start to see how much of your reactivity is driven by automatic responses to pleasant and unpleasant feelings. For example, you might notice that when something has an unpleasant feeling tone, there's an immediate impulse to push it away or distract yourself from it. When something is pleasant, there's often an automatic grasping or desire for more. Simply becoming aware of these patterns creates the possibility of responding more consciously. Third, mindfulness of mind states. Observing the various emotions, thoughts, and mental formations that arise and pass away in consciousness. Anger, joy, confusion, clarity, desire, contentment, all of these can be met with the same basic awareness, like clouds passing through an open sky. The key to mindfulness of mind states is learning to observe them without immediately identifying with them. Instead of, "I am angry," you might notice, anger is present. Instead of, "I'm confused," you might observe, confusion is arising. This subtle shift creates space between you and your mental states, making it less likely that you'll be completely overwhelmed by difficult emotions or overly attached to pleasant ones. This doesn't mean becoming detached or emotionally numb. You can feel emotions fully while also maintaining awareness of their impermanent, conditioned nature. In fact, this kind of mindful awareness often allows you to experience emotions more completely, because you're not simultaneously fighting them or trying to make them last forever. Fourth, mindfulness of mental objects. Becoming aware of the patterns and principles that govern mental experience. Noticing how attachment creates suffering, how mindfulness creates clarity, how kindness creates connection. This is where mindfulness becomes wisdom. This aspect of mindfulness involves observing the relationship between different mental factors. You might notice that when doubt arises, it tends to be accompanied by agitation and confusion. When gratitude is present, there's often a quality of openness and warmth. When you're caught in planning mode, the present moment tends to fade into the background. These observations help you understand the mechanics of your own mind. You also begin to notice how certain mental states support well-being, while others create suffering. This isn't a moral judgment, but simply practical wisdom about what serves your peace and what doesn't. Over time, this understanding naturally guides your choices toward greater well-being. In daily life, right mindfulness might be as simple as really tasting your morning coffee instead of drinking it while planning your day, or noticing the feeling of your feet touching the ground as you walk, or becoming aware of the space between thoughts during a conversation. These small moments of presence accumulate over time into a fundamental shift in how you relate to experience. Right mindfulness is what allows you to catch emotional reactions before they sweep you away, to notice thought patterns before they create suffering, to respond to difficulties with wisdom, rather than just react from old conditioning. It's the difference between being lost in the movie of your life and remembering that you're also the space in which the movie is playing. The culmination of all these practices is right concentration, the development of a mind that's both deeply peaceful and sharply clear. This isn't about spacing out or escaping from reality, but about cultivating a quality of mental stability that can meet any experience with equanimity. Right concentration traditionally refers to the development of jhana, profound states of meditative absorption, where the mind becomes so unified and peaceful that ordinary concerns simply fall away. But even without achieving these classical states, any movement toward greater mental stability and clarity supports the entire path. In practical terms, right concentration might begin with just 5 minutes of daily meditation, sitting quietly and focusing gently on your breath or another anchor for attention. The breath is particularly useful because it's always available, naturally rhythmic, and neither exciting nor boring enough to create strong reactions. When you sit to meditate, you're not trying to stop thinking or achieve any particular state. You're simply practicing the skill of returning attention to your chosen focus whenever you notice the mind has wandered. This is like doing bicep curls for your attention muscle. Each time you notice distraction and return to your focus, you're strengthening your capacity for sustained awareness. Over time, this simple practice strengthens your capacity to remain present and undisturbed, regardless of what's happening around you. You might notice that you're less reactive to stressful situations, more able to focus at work, or simply more present with the people you love. These benefits extend naturally into every area of your life. Right concentration also develops naturally through the other aspects of the path. When your actions are ethical, your speech is kind, your intentions are clear, and your awareness is present, the mind naturally settles into deeper states of peace and clarity. Concentration isn't something you achieve through force, but something that emerges when the conditions are right. Many people find that concentration practice is supported by creating a regular routine. This might mean sitting for meditation at the same time each day, in the same place, for the same duration. The mind learns to settle more quickly when it knows what to expect. Even 5 or 10 minutes of consistent daily practice can be more beneficial than longer, irregular sessions. The gift of a concentrated mind extends far beyond formal meditation periods. When your mind is stable and clear, work becomes more efficient and enjoyable, relationships become more harmonious, and challenges become opportunities for growth rather than sources of stress. You discover an inner resource of peace that's always available, regardless of external circumstances. As concentration deepens, you may begin to experience tastes of the jhana states that the Buddha described. These are profound states of peace and clarity, where the usual mental chatter quiets down and a deep sense of well-being arises. While not everyone will develop jhana, the stability and clarity that come from concentration practice benefit everyone who undertakes it seriously. What's beautiful about the Noble Eightfold Path is how all 8 aspects support and strengthen each other. Clear seeing makes wise intention more natural. Wise intention makes skillful speech easier. Skillful speech creates the trust necessary for ethical action, and so on. It's not a linear progression but a spiral of mutual reinforcement, with each aspect of the path making all the others more accessible and effective. What emerges as you begin walking this ancient path is something remarkable. The 8 factors don't feel like separate practices you have to juggle, but like different facets of a single, integrated way of being. They support and strengthen each other so naturally that practicing one inevitably cultivates the others. It's like learning to play a musical instrument. At first, you focus on individual notes and techniques, but eventually, they flow together into something beautiful and seamless. Right view helps you see clearly why right speech matters, which makes ethical action feel natural rather than forced. Right mindfulness allows you to notice when you're drifting away from wise intention, which guides you back to the path with gentle course corrections. Right concentration provides the mental stability that makes mindfulness more effortless, while right effort ensures that your practice remains sustainable over time. Sarah, a nurse in Chicago, discovered this integration beautifully. She began with just 5 minutes of morning meditation, hoping to manage the stress of working in a busy emergency room. But as her mind became more peaceful through right concentration, she naturally found herself speaking more patiently with difficult patients. As her speech became kinder, her relationships with colleagues improved. As her work environment became more harmonious, she felt more aligned with her intention to truly serve others, rather than just get through her shifts. Within a year, her entire approach to work had transformed. What had felt like a draining job became a meaningful practice of compassion. Her patients began commenting on her calming presence. Her co-workers sought her advice during stressful situations, and she found herself energized rather than depleted by her work. She hadn't changed her job. She had changed how she inhabited her job. David, a father of 2 in Portland, found that the path transformed his parenting. Struggling with anger when his children misbehaved, he began practicing right mindfulness by noticing the physical sensations of frustration before they exploded into yelling. This created space for right speech. Speaking to his kids from clarity rather than reactivity. As his communication improved, family conflicts decreased, which supported his right intention to create a peaceful home environment. His children began responding differently to his calm presence. Instead of power struggles, conversations became possible. Instead of fear-based compliance, genuine cooperation emerged. David realized he was modeling emotional regulation for his children, giving them tools they would carry into their own relationships. The path was benefiting not just his own well-being, but his family's future. Maria, a teacher in Phoenix, discovered that her classroom became a laboratory for practicing the Eightfold Path. Right view helped her see her most challenging students as young people struggling with their own suffering, rather than as problems to control. This shifted her entire approach from discipline-focused to compassion-focused. Right effort meant consistently choosing patience over frustration, even when she was tired. Her students began trusting her more deeply, sharing personal struggles they had never mentioned before. Test scores improved, but more importantly, her classroom became a place where young people felt genuinely cared for. Maria realized that teaching had become her spiritual practice. Every interaction, an opportunity to embody wisdom and compassion. What all these stories reveal is that the path doesn't require withdrawing from ordinary life. Instead, it transforms ordinary life into something sacred. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice right speech. Every decision becomes a chance to align with right intention. Every moment of awareness becomes a step deeper into freedom. The path meets you exactly where you are, in your relationships, your work, your daily challenges, and gradually reveals that there is no separation between spiritual practice and simply living with wisdom and love. When people first hear about the Buddha's path to freedom, they sometimes imagine it leads to a life of detached serenity, floating above the messiness of human existence. But that's not what actually happens. What transforms isn't the content of your life so much as your relationship to that content. You still experience the full range of human emotions, face difficult challenges, and deal with ordinary problems. But something fundamental shifts in how you meet all of it. The first thing people often notice is a quality of space around their experiences. Emotions still arise, but they don't sweep you away quite so completely. Thoughts still come and go, but you're less likely to be lost in their stories. It's like discovering that you've been living in a small, cramped room and suddenly realizing there are windows and doors you never noticed before. The room is still the same size, but it no longer feels confining. In relationships, this shift creates profound changes. When you're not constantly defending a fragile sense of self, you can actually listen to what others are saying without immediately formulating your rebuttal. When you're not desperately trying to get love or approval, you're free to offer genuine care without hidden agendas. When you're not taking everything personally, you can respond to conflicts with curiosity rather than reactivity. Consider how differently conversations unfold when you're not hearing criticism in every suggestion or feeling attacked by every disagreement. That defensive feeling might still arise, but now there's a moment of space before it takes over your entire response. In that space, you can ask yourself, what is this person actually saying? What might they be needing right now? This simple shift transforms communication patterns in profound ways. When people feel truly heard, they naturally become softer and more appreciative. When children witness less reactivity and more genuine presence from the adults in their lives, they often become more cooperative and emotionally open. It's as if entire relationship dynamics were waiting for someone to stop the cycle of reactivity. Work, too, transforms in unexpected ways. As the mind becomes more concentrated through practice, the ability to focus on complex problems improves dramatically. But more than just increased productivity, there's a different relationship to workplace stress entirely. When deadlines become tight or demands increase, that familiar anxiety might still arise. But instead of getting swept away by stories about how terrible or unfair the situation is, there's space to acknowledge, yes, this is challenging, without adding layers of mental suffering. This clarity makes creative problem-solving more accessible and collaboration more natural. Instead of hoarding information out of insecurity, sharing knowledge becomes effortless. Instead of competing with others, there's genuine joy in supporting their success. The same work that once felt draining begins to carry a sense of meaning and contribution. Perhaps most remarkably, the path changes how you meet life's inevitable difficulties. When serious illness touches your family, or when loss arrives unexpectedly, the initial response might still include shock, sadness, or fear. But there's less of the additional suffering that comes from fighting reality or creating stories about how catastrophic everything will be. You can be heartbroken about difficult circumstances without being destroyed by them. The sadness or fear is real and appropriate, but it doesn't have to be amplified by mental commentary about unfairness or personal inadequacy. This clarity creates space to focus on what's actually needed in each moment, rather than being paralyzed by emotional reactivity. During times of crisis or caregiving, this translates into being genuinely helpful. You can advocate effectively, coordinate practical matters without falling into old patterns of conflict, and be truly present during difficult conversations. There's space to love and care without being consumed by your own fear and sadness. What's particularly beautiful about walking this path is how the changes ripple out into the world in ways you never intended or expected. When you're more present and less reactive, the people around you often become more present and less reactive too. When you speak from clarity rather than emotion, others find it easier to hear what you're actually saying. When you're not constantly defending yourself, others don't feel the need to attack or protect themselves around you. This happens in every context where human beings interact. When one person in any group is genuinely peaceful, that peace becomes available to everyone. When one person breaks a cycle of reactivity, space opens for new possibilities. Children become more focused when the adults around them are present and calm. Colleagues make better decisions when someone maintains clarity during stressful situations. Even strangers often mirror the energy of genuine presence and openness. This isn't because you're trying to manipulate others into changing. It's because human nervous systems are deeply interconnected. When one person remains centered, even people who are initially agitated often find themselves naturally settling. Strength without hardness, alertness without anxiety. These qualities are contagious in the most beautiful way. What emerges from walking this path isn't perfection, but rather a profound peace with imperfection. You still make mistakes, still have difficult days, still sometimes react in ways you wish you hadn't. But these human failings don't devastate you the way they once might have. They become information rather than indictments, learning opportunities rather than evidence of inadequacy. This acceptance of your own humanity paradoxically makes you more capable of genuine growth. When you're not spending energy fighting reality or defending your ego, that energy becomes available for wisdom, compassion, and skillful action. When you're not afraid of making mistakes, you're more willing to take risks that serve others. When you're not attached to being right, you're more able to learn from everyone you meet. Many people discover that they're still the same person with the same personality and the same basic challenges. But they're no longer at war with any of it. that inner peace changes how they show up for everyone in their life. The same difficult colleague becomes easier to work with, not because they've changed, but because the reactivity that made their behavior so triggering has softened. The same family dynamics that once created stress become workable, not because the family has transformed, but because there's less need to control or fix everyone else's behavior. The same daily challenges that once felt overwhelming become simply what they are: temporary conditions to meet with presence and appropriate action. This is the profound transformation the Buddha pointed to. Not becoming someone else, but discovering the freedom that was always available in being exactly who you are. It's a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect, but rather finds completeness in the acceptance of imperfect circumstances. A peace that doesn't require the absence of difficulty, but discovers stillness in the center of every storm. A joy that doesn't need everything to go your way, but finds contentment in the simple fact of being alive and aware in this moment. And perhaps most beautifully, a love that doesn't depend on others being different than they are, but extends naturally from the recognition that everyone, like you, is simply trying to find their way home to peace. If you've made it this far in our exploration together, something in your heart has already begun to stir. You've felt the recognition of that universal restlessness we all carry, seen through the beautiful trap of chasing happiness, and glimpsed the possibility of a different kind of freedom. Now comes the most beautiful moment of all, the moment when ancient wisdom becomes your living practice. But here's what's so tender about beginning. You don't need to transform your entire life overnight. You don't need to become a different person or achieve some elevated state before you're worthy of walking this path. You can start exactly where you are, with whatever circumstances you're currently facing, using whatever time and energy you actually have available. The most practical first step is often the simplest. Choose one aspect of the Eightfold Path that resonates most deeply with you right now. Perhaps it's right mindfulness, setting aside just 5 minutes each morning to sit quietly and notice your breathing. Not trying to achieve any particular state, not forcing anything to happen, just gently returning your attention to the breath whenever you notice your mind has wandered. Or maybe right speech calls to you. That simple practice of pausing before you speak to ask, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? This single shift can transform your relationships in ways that might surprise you. When people feel truly heard and respected in your presence, they naturally open in response. Perhaps right intention feels most accessible. Starting each day by setting a gentle intention for how you want to meet whatever arises. Today, I intend to respond to frustration with patience. Today, I intend to listen more and judge less. Today, I intend to notice moments of beauty that I usually overlook. These small internal shifts ripple out into every interaction. Or maybe right view draws you in, beginning to notice the impermanent nature of your experiences throughout the day. When you're stuck in traffic, remembering, this too shall pass. When you're enjoying a beautiful sunset, appreciating it fully while knowing it won't last forever. When difficult emotions arise, observing them with the curious awareness that they're like weather patterns moving through the sky of your consciousness. The key is to start small and be consistent rather than starting big and burning out. A few minutes of genuine practice each day will create more lasting change than hours of sporadic effort. Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument. Regular, gentle practice gradually builds skill and enjoyment, while irregular, intense sessions often create frustration and abandonment. And please, as you begin this journey, be so gentle with yourself. This path isn't about becoming perfect or fixing what's wrong with you. You're not broken, and you don't need to be repaired. You're a human being having a perfectly normal human experience of occasionally feeling lost, restless, or incomplete. The path simply offers tools for relating to these universal experiences with greater wisdom and peace. There will be days when meditation feels impossible, when you react in old patterns despite your best intentions, when the gap between your aspirations and your reality feels overwhelming. These aren't signs that you're failing or that the path isn't working. They're simply part of the process. Even the Buddha had difficult days during his years of seeking. Even dedicated practitioners throughout history have faced doubt, resistance, and setbacks. What matters isn't perfection, but persistence. What counts isn't never falling down, but continuing to get back up. Each time you notice you've been caught in reactivity and choose to return to presence, you're strengthening your capacity for freedom. Each time you respond to your own mistakes with compassion rather than self-criticism, you're embodying the very wisdom the path is designed to cultivate. One of the most beautiful aspects of this journey is that you're not walking it alone. Across the globe, millions of people are exploring these same teachings, facing these same challenges, and discovering these same freedoms. This community of practitioners, known in Buddhist tradition as the Sangha, extends across cultures, religions, and centuries. Every time you sit in meditation, you're joining countless others who are also choosing presence over distraction. Every time you respond to difficulty with patience rather than reactivity, you're contributing to a global movement toward greater wisdom and compassion. Every time you choose understanding over judgment, you're part of an ancient lineage of people committed to reducing suffering in the world. You might find local meditation groups, online communities, or books by contemporary teachers who can support your practice. Or you might simply carry the knowledge that somewhere, right now, someone else is also learning to breathe consciously, speak kindly, and meet life's challenges with an open heart. This invisible network of practitioners creates a field of support that transcends physical proximity. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were both simple and profound: "Be a lamp unto yourself." He wasn't encouraging selfishness or isolation, but rather the recognition that the wisdom you seek is already present within your own direct experience. No teacher, no book, no technique can give you something you don't already possess. They can only point you toward the freedom that is your birthright as a conscious being. This means that your own life becomes your greatest teacher. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice right speech. Every challenging situation is a chance to cultivate patience and wisdom. Every moment of presence is a step deeper into the understanding that peace doesn't come from getting what you want, but from wanting what you have in this moment. Your job isn't to become the Buddha or achieve some impossible standard of enlightenment. Your job is simply to be the most conscious, compassionate version of yourself that you can be today. And then tomorrow, if you're fortunate enough to have another day, to do the same thing again. This simple commitment, sustained over time, creates transformation that extends far beyond what you might imagine possible. Remember that moment we began with. That 3 a.m. voice asking, "Is this all there is?" As you walk this path, something beautiful happens to that question. It doesn't disappear. It transforms. Instead of arising from restlessness and dissatisfaction, it begins to emerge from genuine curiosity and wonder. "Is this all there is?" becomes an invitation to look more deeply into the miracle of this moment. The simple fact that you're alive and aware, that you can see and hear and feel and love, that you can choose kindness over cruelty, presence over distraction, understanding over judgment, that you can be a source of peace in a world that desperately needs more peace. The question shifts from, "Why isn't life giving me more?" to, "How can I give more to life?" From, "When will I finally be happy?" to, "How can I be helpful right now?" From "What's wrong with this situation?" to "What can this situation teach me?" And in those quiet moments, whether at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., or any time when you find yourself present and aware, there's often a profound recognition. This is enough. Not because life is perfect or because all your problems have been solved, but because you've discovered something that doesn't depend on life being perfect or problems being solved. You've found the peace that was always available, the love that was never absent, the freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances. You've come home to yourself. And from that homecoming, everything becomes possible. Not the desperate possibilities of getting what you think you need to be happy, but the gentle possibilities of giving what the world needs you to give. Your presence, your kindness, your wisdom, your peace. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Your step. Today. Now. Right here, right where you are, the path to freedom opens before you. All you need to do is begin.